President Nixon's 1972 visit to Beijing was a landmark diplomatic event, marking the first time a U.S. president had visited the People's Republic of China. He practiced with chopsticks for weeks beforehand to show respect for his hosts during the televised state dinners. A local woman known as Camberly Kate dedicated her life to rescuing stray animals in her UK town. She cared for them using her own modest funds and was a familiar sight, pushing her cart full of dogs through the streets. The Sony Micro TV, introduced in the early 60s, was one of the first truly portable televisions. For the first time, you could watch TV in the back of a car, provided you had enough batteries to power the transistorized device. While promoting The Empire Strikes Back in 1980, the main cast posed for a series of publicity shots. This candid moment captures the off-screen camaraderie between Harrison Ford, Carrie Fisher, and Mark Hamill. Under the gaze of communist leaders, Romanian students attend a mandatory dialectical materialism class in 1951. Such courses were a required part of university education throughout the Eastern Bloc during the Cold War. In 1964, Toshiba demonstrated a prototype video phone, allowing operators in Tokyo to see who they were talking to. The technology was groundbreaking for its time, but was too bulky and expensive for public use. Paratroopers of the 101st Airborne Division, known as the Filthy 13, shaved their hair into mohawks before the D-Day invasion. The intimidating look was meant to boost morale and unnerve their enemies. This photo from a town hall tower shows the complete devastation of Dresden, Germany, following the Allied firebombing in February 1945. The attacks created a firestorm that destroyed over 1,600 acres of the city center. A young soldier says his farewell to a woman at New York's Penn Station in 1943 before shipping out for World War II to sea. The photo was taken by famed Life magazine photographer Alfred Eisenstadt. The massive ship in this photo is a 55-foot-long, 10-ton scale model of the Titanic. It was built for the 1980 movie Raise the Titanic, long before computer-generated effects became the norm. Actress Sybil Shepherd is pictured here around 1976, the same year she starred in Martin Scorsese's gritty film Taxi Driver. Her look in the 70s defined the style of the era for many. The Sinclair Microvision, released in 1966, was marketed as the world's first pocket-sized television. It was a technological marvel, though its tiny screen and short battery life made it more of a novelty than a practical device. A procession of early automobiles parades through the 1904 St. Louis World's Fair. For most visitors, seeing so many of these new horseless carriages in one place was an astonishing sight. The massive oil tanker Esso Hibernia dwarfs a residential street as it's being constructed in Wallsend, UK, in 1970. The ship was so large, it looked like a skyscraper looming over the neighborhood houses. A 15-year-old tourist named Meghan Markle poses for a photo outside Buckingham Palace during a trip to London in 1996. 2 decades later, she would marry Prince Harry, a resident of that same palace. In 1949, when less than 10% of American households owned a television, gathering around a small set like this was a major event. Notice the girl in the foreground is still reading the newspaper, a sign of how new the video medium was. Photography was strictly forbidden in the Supreme Court, so in 1932, Dr. Eric Salomon faked a broken arm to hide a camera inside his sling. He managed to capture this illegal but historic photograph of the court in session. Actors Sean Connery and Brigitte Bardot take a break from filming the 1968 Western Chaleco in Spain. The film was a critical and commercial failure, but it produced some memorable off-screen photos of its 2 famous leads. The Queen Mother inspects the crew of a massive Avro Lancaster bomber at an RAF base in February 1944. These visits were a crucial part of the royal family's efforts to boost morale during the height of World War II. A newly famous Mark Hamill attends an event with his wife Marilu York. In 1978, he had met York, a dental hygienist, before his Star Wars fame, and they married shortly after this photo was taken. Cheryl Ladd, who replaced Farrah Fawcett on Charlie's Angels, wears a Star Wars t-shirt in this late 70s photo. It's a great snapshot of 2 of the biggest pop culture phenomena of the decade colliding. Princess Badia bint Ali was one of the only members of the Iraqi royal family to survive a bloody coup in 1958. She escaped the massacre at the palace and was granted asylum at the Saudi embassy in Baghdad. Soviet circus performer Olga Borisova performs with her lion, Kolya, in 1977. She and her husband were known for their unique approach, raising lions in their home to build a deep bond of trust. Ruth Carol Taylor became the first African-American flight attendant in the U.S. when she was hired by Mohawk Airlines in 1957. Her career was cut short after just 6 months due to the airline industry's common practice of banning married stewardesses. At the Motormat Drive-In in 1940s Los Angeles, customers didn't have to wait for a car hop. An automated conveyor belt system would deliver the tray of food from the kitchen right to the car window. The powerful Soviet women's gymnastics team is pictured here before the 1958 World Championships in Moscow. Led by star Larisa Latinina, they would go on to dominate the competition, winning the team gold medal. The Boeing 376 Strativan Stratocruiser, seen here flying over a highway in 1950, was the pinnacle of post-war luxury air travel. However, its 4 massive Pratt & Whitney engines were notoriously unreliable and prone to in-flight failures. Racing enthusiast Steve McQueen has a memorable reaction upon meeting actress Jane Mansfield at a sporting event in the early 1960s. Mansfield was famous for her attention-grabbing public appearances. Hours after Albert Einstein's death in 1955, a photographer from Life magazine captured this image of his office desk. The space was left exactly as the physicist had used it, with his final calculations still on the blackboard. Elvis Presley shares a scene with actress Deborah Paget on the set of his first film, Love Me Tender, in 1956. Presley was reportedly infatuated with Paget, his first on-screen love interest during the production. This Japanese koi fish, named Hanako, was reportedly 226 years old when it passed away in 1977. Its incredible lifespan was verified by examining the growth rings on its scales, similar to counting the rings on a tree. Flight attendants from all of the launch customer airlines gather in front of the first Boeing 747 in 1969. The massive jet could carry more than twice as many passengers as previous airliners, making international travel accessible to the middle class. Actress Raquel Welch is photographed on a beach in 1968, the same year she starred in the detective film Lady in Cement with Frank Sinatra. This look became one of her most recognizable publicity photos from the era. Hollywood legend Ingrid Bergman walks with her daughter, a young Isabella Rossellini, in the 1970s. Rossellini would soon launch her own successful acting and modeling career, following in her famous mother's footsteps. An assembly line at the Douglas Aircraft Plant in California churns out SBD Dauntless dive bombers in 1943. These were the workhorse planes that famously helped turn the tide of the Pacific War at the Battle of Midway. An early McDonald's restaurant from the 1950s advertises its Speedy service system and 15-cent hamburgers. The sign proudly notes that they had already sold over 12 million burgers, years before Ray Kroc's involvement. General Dwight D. Eisenhower sits at the center of the Allied High Command in London, 1944. From this table, these men planned and executed the final stages of the war in Europe, including the D-Day invasion. Actress Ann Sheridan, nicknamed the Oomph Girl, poses for a studio publicity photo in the 1940s. She was one of Warner Brothers' most popular stars during the World War II era, known for her roles in film noir. Music genius Stevie Wonder is seen here without his signature sunglasses during a studio session in 1980. This was taken around the time he released his classic album Hotter Than July, which included the hit Master Blaster Jammin'. Members of Led Zeppelin relax backstage before a show in Indianapolis during their 1975 U.S. tour. These candid moments stood in stark contrast to their larger-than-life performances in sold-out arenas. Surrealist painter Salvador Dalí turns a simple gondola ride into a public spectacle at the 1961 Venice Film Festival. He was a master of self-promotion who treated every public appearance as a piece of performance art. A young Michael Jackson meets his idol, the legendary dancer Fred Astaire, in the late 1970s. Astaire, who rarely gave out praise, later admitted he was in awe of Jackson's natural talent. Rows of identical, mass-produced apartment blocks dominate a residential district in 1969 Leningrad, USSR. These buildings, nicknamed Khrushchevkas, were built across the Soviet Union to solve a severe post-war housing shortage. Students at the Wallin School, one of the first academic secondary schools for girls in Sweden, are pictured here around 1908. At the time, formal education for women was still a relatively new and progressive concept. In 1926, the historic Oseberg Viking ship is carefully moved on rails through the streets of Oslo, Norway. The fragile 1,100-year-old vessel was being transported from its excavation site to its final home in a museum. British actress Vivien Leigh is seen here in a 1937 publicity photo just before she won the most coveted role in Hollywood history. She would soon be cast as Scarlett O'Hara in Gone with the Wind after a legendary 2-year search that screen-tested over 1,400 other actresses. A young Jim Henson holds his creation, Rolf the dog, in this 1964 photo. Before The Muppet Show, or Sesame Street, Rolf was the first Muppet to become a national star through his regular appearances on The Jimmy Dean Show. An early electric street sweeper is tested on the streets of Berlin, Germany, around 1907. Pulled by a horse, the machine used its own power source to rotate the large brush, showcasing a transition from animal to mechanical power. Women workers assembled the fuselage of a B-17F bomber at the Douglas Aircraft Plant in Long Beach, California, during World War II. These Rosies the Riveter were essential to the war effort, filling critical manufacturing jobs while men were serving overseas. The intense fan reaction known as Beatlemania is captured here during a concert in the mid-1960s. The overwhelming emotion displayed by young fans was a new cultural phenomenon that was both thrilling for teens and bewildering to their parents.